Hey, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ podcast. On this episode, I've got one of my closest friends, one of the coolest, slickest cats you will ever meet, Ron Baugh from Wheel Pros. Dude, how are you doing on this beautiful Friday?
I'm doing very well, man. I'm glad to join you guys here. You might have a little background noise of the Long Beach Grand Prix, which is like just a few blocks away. I heard it for the first time this morning. So you know, it's the good kind of background noise, but yeah, it might interfere a little bit. But I'm headed over there after this. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting Friday.
See, like this, and obviously this is going to air on a Tuesday, but today is Friday, and of course, Ron is dropping. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about when Ron does all the coolest shit in the world, like Long Beach Grand Prix. Where is that? Oh, it's around the corner from my house. It's like, dude, that's everybody out there who's still dealing with some portion of winter right now, and I know we're coming out. They're listening to this, be like, I hate that son of a bitch.
Well, they didn't have much to be envious of this past winter. I'm sure you got it up in NorCal, but we got pummeled with rain all winter long from December up until it rained yesterday.
Dude,
out of nowhere. I was shocked.
In the 11 years that I've been in California, I've never seen weather like this before. We have just gotten, torrential downpours, trees down, it's been a little bit bananas.
I think there's been like crazy flooding and stuff. And I think the last time we had a winter this wet was like the year that I moved out here, 98, 99, that winter. So my first year at USC, I was just like, what is this? This is not what I signed up for. And
this is not SoCal.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt this entire winter. I'm just like, dude, everybody's joking. Like, we need to get a rebate. We need to get money back on our rent or our mortgages. Like,
I know.
Not what we pay for, but we need the rain, and hopefully there wasn't like too much damage and loss of life, but it's just a mess down here when it rains like that.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, listen, on today's episode of the podcast, I figured it would be a cool idea. Ron and I, we grew up in an era of lack of internet for the most part, where our kind of automotive structure was not only based around where we grew up, but really like television shows and movies and, things like that. So I wanted to talk about that today because I was trying to think about something, and I was watching car chase videos last night on YouTube, and I was like, God damn. I was like, there are some amazing car chases, and also like how things have changed over the years and, cinematography and how they're portrayed on screen. So that said, dude, what were some of like your biggest influences growing up? Whether it's, let's start with television. What were some of your favorite automotive television shows growing up?
Of course, I mean, you've got the trifecta of Dukes of Hazzard, A-Team, and Knight Riders. So I mean, those are ubiquitous, like inescapable. Like if you were a kid and you had any like interest in cars or anything automotive, like those you were glued to the set for those.
Yep.
I definitely sat right in front of the TV for all the car chases and all those shows. My grandparents had to tell me, get away from the TV. You're going to burn your eyes out. Like whatever, I'm playing with my Hot Wheels right in front, like reenacting all the scenes. And, that stuff was extremely influential in a way that I didn't realize until I was an adult. And I'm just like, why am I like this? Why do I want everything V8 powered rear drive? Why do I want to, power slide and fishtail, like from every stop? Like it was literally the first day that I drove by myself. I was really fortunate. My grandfather bought me in 1994. I was only 14. Actually, I was 13 when he got it. He bought it for my birthday, but he bought me my first car, which was a 93 Mustang GT. It was automatic, but like, I drove for a year with him in the car as I had my learner's permit. But the first day that I drove by myself, I went to school, I went and took my driver's test. I dropped him off at home and I went to school. And the first thing I did when school was over that day was like peel out from every intersection, like try and power slide every right turn, every left turn.
Yep.
And I was pulling, like I was going to track practice. Like you have to move from like the junior lot to the senior lot when you go to practice. And I remember standing on it, just cranking it, and like, it was 200 horsepower, 5.0. It didn't make a ton of power, but it made pretty decent torque. If you stood on it and held the brake, like you get it brake traction, but it wouldn't just peel out. And like I would do neutral drops all the time. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted tire spin.
Right.
But this first day, like pretty much first time drive by myself, I crank it stand on it, making a left turn, and there's a dump truck coming at me.
Oh
And
no.
I'm all crossed up, have no idea what I'm doing. Still to this day, I can't believe I didn't hit this thing because like I was inches away from it. And I learned a very valuable lesson in control and throttle moderation that day. But it was a long time coming. I could not wait for the day that I could basically reenact my everything that I saw on the screen, especially with the Duke boys.
Dude, I'll tell you, it's those shows I think were so influential, right? And there were, I mean, you had that. Do you remember like the Fall Guy and Hardcastle and McCormick?
Oh, bro.
And it's like my entire childhood is the sound of a quadrijet just opening and goes, whoop, 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 whoop. You know what I mean? That kind of just police chasing someone, and I look back at it now and I still go back and I watch all those things on YouTube and I look at the stunt guys and I'm like, these guys were just insane.
Totally.
They and like, with like on the Dukes of Hazzard, like I have a Charger and like I can sling that sucker around, but watching what these guys did with a 17-foot long canoe was just mind-boggling. And then like Fall Guy taking that GMC and just, it's crazy. Dude. It was crazy.
So that truck, the Fall Guy truck, is probably one of the most like influential vehicles in my life. And my grandfather was a Ford truck guy. Like he was just a Ford guy and a Cadillac guy in general, but he wouldn't touch like GM or Chevy trucks. But I wanted to replicate the Fall Guy truck so bad. But like I was 4 years old. My grandfather had like a 70. Yeah. My grandfather had a 79 4x2 F-150, or it might have been an F-100 at the time. I don't remember. But anyway, it was a blue truck, 2-wheel drive. He had like done some like trim and stuff on it and like just kind of personalized it, made it his. But I was just like, this is corny. Like, this is not cool. Like, this truck needs to be lifted on big raised white letter tires with like chrome or aluminum wheels. We need the roll bar. We need the brush guard. Like, we need that, like the Fall Guy truck. Like, I wanted to replicate that. It had to be a Ford for him, but he totally indulged, man. And he like he basically let me like pick out all the parts and stuff. And like I was reading like age 3 and like reading car magazines and stuff. So, my grandparents would encourage that by letting me buying car magazines and four-wheeler magazine in particular when I was a kid, because this was like the time of like the high riser trucks with like like the 44s and like
big
like
super swampers and stuff like that.
4 shocks per corner, and like they were show trucks. They weren't functional at all, but they just looked cool as hell. And like we were also going to see like monster trucks and tractor pulls and stuff like that. And all that stuff was just like forefront in my brain. I was just like, I want that like for us every day. Like I want to go outside and see that and like have this big, boss truck to play with. So he totally indulged and like, he traded his truck in for an 84 F-150. It was red on red, and totally went ham with it. Like we lifted it. At first we did aluminum American racing wheels with like big tires, probably like 35s, I guess at the time. Big chrome roll bar with Casey highlights on the top. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and it had a brush guard for a while. I don't know what happened to that, but he also did train horns on the hood and like of course chrome step bars too. But he did train horns on the hood, and it was, I don't know, it was. My grandfather was a retired cop, so like he could basically get away with anything.
He get away with everything.
Flash his badge, but like if people annoyed him or if he saw somebody doing something that he didn't necessarily approve of, he would like he did the big rig style pull for the horn. So I made him do all that, like CB radio. So if somebody got on his nerves or wasn't moving in traffic, he'd hit the train horn and just shock the shit out of him. But he would also do that when I was like if I was late for school and he was taking me to school. If I was late and I was walking in front of the truck, he'd hit the horn then and blast me awake. And I was like, all right, I'm up now. Like but man, the Fall Guy truck is still something that I like love and admire.
But that truck, out of all the vehicles that came out of television in Hollywood and stuff like that, you never see a recreation of that truck.
I've seen a few, and like I've seen them like sell at auction, like Meekum and stuff, and they sold for pretty decent money. But I mean, I think the thing is like now everyone wants short beds, and like the long beds aren't as sought after. And I think they
Yeah.
just, you know, I love the stance of that. Like personally, I prefer the long bed. In fact,
Me too.
I have a 79 K10 that I want to. I've already got the lift kit. I've already got the wheels.
Yeah.
And it was a weird deal. I basically took that truck in trade for helping a friend sell some cars that she had, like, you know, inherited unexpectedly. And I was like, the truck was sitting in a barn in South Dakota. And this was in 2020, like peak of pandemic. And she basically said, there's this property there. I need to go and like handle some things on the property in order to get it ready to sell. I need to inspect the property. And we knew that this truck was there. And I said, okay, well, I can go with you. And instead of paying me for all of this, like, I don't even know how to bill you for this, you know, like you're a friend. Like, I don't really, you know, I don't know how to monetize this properly. Like, this is not what I do. And, you know, I'm just trying to help you out. But the deal that I struck with her basically was, if I can get that truck started, like we found pictures of it, and then we had somebody else local go and take more pictures of it. So I had him open the hood, take pictures underneath and stuff. And basically I told her, if I can get that truck started and out of that barn so that I can get it onto a transporter and get it back here, then I'll take that as my payment and you don't owe me anything. Like, so we did that. We went, like, she handled whatever she needed to do with the property. I spent a couple days like just like putting gas in the thing and cleaning everything out. It was just covered, like the bed was full of junk, like everything was full of junk, but the truck was pretty original. It had 72,000 miles on it, like everything was there. And I got it started. I got it in gear. I moved it back and forth. I didn't want to mess with the garage doors because it looked like going to come crashing down, and I knew I couldn't get the truck out of there then, and somebody else would probably come and steal it. So I just rocked it back and forth, moved it within the garage, and I was like, all right, cool. That's a deal. And like, I've been busy with other projects, and I honestly just haven't, you know, had the time or the patience to mess with it. But that is the plan. Is basically, it's not the same color. It's green and white with like a green interior, but it will be stanced like the Fall Guy truck. Like that's
awesome.
That's my goal for that. And it's just like, finally I'll get to have my version of the Fall Guy truck. So I'm super excited about that.
Dude, I think that's great. I think, you know, we're so impressionable back then. And, you know, it was interesting. We're thinking about some of the car chases and that we watched. I mean, so many people now have grown up Fast and Furious and stuff like that, and they feel like, well, those are car chases. And I'm like, not really. I think of like the old school stuff from like a lot of the older movies, like, and you know, I'll reference Bullet only because everybody knows it. You know, the movie sucked, but the car chase was decent. But other ones, like if you've ever seen like The French Connection or 7-Ups, or
I don't know that one.
Oh, dude, the 7-Ups is one of the best car chases out there. It's with Roy Scheider and Bill Hickman, who actually drove the Charger in Bullet, drives this Pontiac. Oh, God, I forget the model. Some big goof Pontiac coupe, but it's cool. But that was a great one. And then, you know, from the 80s, did you ever see the movie No Man's Land?
Is that the one with the Porsche 911 on the
911 Turbo and the IROC? Yeah. So like
I never knew what that movie was, and I've never watched the movie, but I've seen that chase so many times, and I'm just like, dude, they are whipping. They were driving the shit out of those cars,
dude. And that was Charlie Sheen, who was a car thief who only stole Porsches, and DB Sweeney, who was an actor from back in the day. And that was, to this day, I think, my favorite Porsche chase scene. It's just great. But
that thing just looked on the ragged edge like the entire time.
Always.
Like the body roll, and like, you know, you could tell they were pushing that thing.
And that's the thing about like the 80s and 90s car chases, right? Like, I feel like the stunt guys, and you and I both know Hollywood stunt people, right? And, you know, when you see the stuff that they did back in the day, they must have been like, we're doing a car chase? And it's like, because they, to your point, they pushed so hard. And these cars
we got?
Dude,
like, can we go through? Like, we're gonna use them all.
Like, and it seemed like they were all really filmed at speed. There were no special effects because there really weren't any special effects back then. And it was just, my God, as a young kid watching these things, I was like, I need to figure out a way to do something like this for a living.
Totally. It was I'm trying to think. Like, you mentioned the Fast and the Furious, and like the reason why that never appealed to me was because it did seem so overproduced, and like, you know, like
Yeah.
if you're a car guy, like, you know, a drag race, like even you know, a tuned Honda is not going to last a minute and a half, like no matter where you're racing, like, you know,
27 gears.
all these jump cuts and shifts and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, you know, it was cool. I was super excited to go to the theater to see the first one, and then after that I was like, nah, like this doesn't hold a candle to Smokey and the Bandit or
Dude,
any of those Hal Needham movies. Like, you know, it was just like
Cannonball Run.
Yeah, everything was super authentic, and like, you know, the driving was real, and that was what I appreciated more than anything. Like, sure, they destroyed cars and like we didn't necessarily realize it, but you know, the stunt driving was real, and like it was relatable. It was just like, holy shit, like, you know what went into it. And like as a kid, like maybe you didn't understand like the risks that were taken, but you just knew that somebody was really in control of that car and like was capable of doing those things. And that's what was so impressive about it. It was just like, man, like one day like I might be able to learn how to drive like that. Like that was, you know, it was also, I don't want to say like an age of lawlessness, but you know, there were no cameras, you know, there weren't camera phones, like no like red light cameras. Like if you were out in the middle of the country and doing whatever you were doing, like there was nobody around to see it. Like you didn't have to worry about getting caught. And like, you know, I feel like police chases like increase in popularity in the 80s and 90s because there are cameras and people want to be like infamous. They want that shit to be on TV and they want to be a spectacle. But back then, like if you were running from the cops, that was the last thing you wanted, you know?
Well, that's just it. And I think you're absolutely right. The fact that we didn't have camera phones or any cameras for that matter, unless it was a still photo, allowed us to do so many different things that you just couldn't get away with now. And I mean, yes, you have things like takeovers, right? We see them all the time up here in the Bay Area, which is the dumbest fucking things I've ever seen. But that's not, like, we grew up driving in the country, like on Eastern Long Island and stuff like that, where you could go out and you could sling donuts in a field, or you could like find your favorite road and come out full crossed up, you know, the tires on fire. And like, if you screwed up, odds are you weren't going to hit anything, you know? But it was, I think that whole period of not being connected to the world. And I think it goes back to, since we didn't have phones, the car literally was our escape. It's how we got away from people, and it was our sense of expression, so we could go out and really play with them. And they were still like cheap.
Cheap, analog, like, you know, they weren't super fast. You know, you get some tire spin, but you're not going to get 150 miles an hour. Like you're not going to get up to like any real life threatening speeds there. But like, you know, like I said, I learned a lot of lessons, you know, by myself in the first year of driving. Like I was super excited. My grandparents had a lake house like 45 minutes west of Atlanta in a town called Villa Rica. And like, it was pretty much country on the way out there. Like now that's a suburb of Atlanta. It's like 50 miles out, but it's like a suburb, like people commute from there. But back then it was like cow pastures, like farmland and just forest. And the first time that I got to go to the lake house by myself, I don't remember why. It was just like one Sunday afternoon. There were two ways you could go. You could take like back roads, or you could take I-20 to like whatever exit. Like, so I used to hate the back roads because my grandfather he had like Cadillacs and like that big truck. And like, you know, it wasn't fun. The back roads weren't fun. They're tight, twisty 2-lanes. They weren't fun in any of those cars. And he'd drive super slow, and it would just add like half an hour to our, you know, our drive. So I didn't like him then, but then I rode with my dad a couple times, and he had like a Jeep Cherokee with a 4.0, and it was like tuned, had exhaust, had jet chips, whatever. And like, you know, that thing was a torque monster, and he would hustle the shit out of it. And like, he put bigger, wider tires on it and wheels and shit. And like, I was like, oh, like you can, like, again, like I didn't know you could do this. Like, you know, I thought all cars were slow and like, you know, floaty. And it was just like, it opened my eyes to kind of the possibilities of spirited driving. And the first time I got to go by myself, I'm in the Mustang. I'm like, I'm taking the back roads. And like, I know there's one spot where my dad almost always jumps his Cherokee. I was like, I'm going to jump this fucking Mustang. Like, pardon my French, but I had to do it. I was just like, you know, 16, I had no idea of consequences.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, the jump was almost blind. Like you come up and it's like a right turn. And for sure, if you jump, you're going to land in the oncoming lane of traffic. But you know, there's nobody out on a Sunday morning, so you know, I took the risk, and I probably wouldn't do that now. But back then, you know, not knowing anything, like I was like, we're jumping this thing. So I did that. totally landed crossed up. And again, I'm just like sawing at the wheel, like just praying, like, please don't go in the woods, and like got it straightened out. And I, heart's pounding, I'm sweating. I was just like, that was awesome. Like I never want to do that again, but that was awesome. That was everything I hoped it would be. And now I like have so much more respect for like these stunt drivers and these people that do this for a living, because that was terrifying. And I almost tore my stuff up.
Well, I think that's, it's so funny. And again, I think this goes back to a period in time. Like I remember my first car, my aunt gave it to me, and it was an 81 Mercury Capri,
Really?
a 4i Capri. Yeah. And a little 4-cylinder. And that thing, all I wanted to do, I remember I put a $200 stereo in it. This is how little I knew back then. I put a $200 stereo in it, and it had one speaker in the dash that was blown. And so you couldn't even turn it up because it would just crackle. But and I promptly totaled that car on one of my favorite twisty roads. Oh yeah, wiped it out. Just wiped the sucker out. Thinking that I was Burt Reynolds, and I was not. I was Mike Musto, who did no shit. And that didn't end well. But then you grow up and you start watching these movies and stuff, and it was weird because I kind of became a student of these 80s car chases and like the Dukes of Hazzard, and it got to the point where I would look at the drivers as they were driving, and I was like, well, how come they're not turning their hands 1,000 degrees or whatever the case is? And little by little, you kind of teach yourself, and especially in the Northeast, snow was my best friend.
Nice, yeah.
Oh my God, man! As soon as it snowed, I was out. I was like, I'm going out, and I would go to the parking lots and teach myself how to drift and do all these different things. And that's why it was funny when I came to California, and you realize when it rains here, people just crash. I feel like they just crash into each other because they've never driven in moisture or in dirt like you and I grew up with and stuff. And it was like, I'm so thankful we grew up in that period.
Totally.
Where we could, that these vehicles and that kind of entertainment it made such an impression.
Yeah. And like, I didn't realize then how influential all of that stuff was, but all I cared about ever was cars. And like, for whatever reason, like I thought I was going to be an architect from like the age of 10 on. And I went to camps at like Duke University and Georgia Tech, and like, I'm going to be an architect. Like I want to make buildings. Like really, I was more interested in interior design, but I hadn't realized that until later. But, I just thought being an architect was the only way to earn like a legitimate, degree or career in design. And I had no idea about like, I thought all car designers were like failed like aerospace engineers. Like honestly, like nobody ever told me, nobody ever gave me like any insight on that career path, which I regret to some degree, but at the same time, like everything I feel like worked out the way it was supposed to for me. But it was just, I was obsessed with cars, like car magazines everywhere. Every time we went to the store, I had a subscription to everything. I still have most of those car magazines, and Hot Wheels, and then later like 1/18 scale cars, and then I've been drawing cars since I was 3, so I have like stacks and stacks of all these drawings that I used to tape up to my wall, and I used to draw like I had my own individual style. I used to draw cars with square wheels until I was like 10 years old. I don't know what that was about, but I used to get so much crap for that, especially from my dad. He's just like, the square wheels, man, what is going on? And I'm just like, they're round. I don't know what you're talking about. Like I could not see that I was basically drawing like rounded corner squares. Like they just look like round wheels.
Wheels.
That was so it was like my childhood was consumed by cars, and luckily both my grandfather and my dad were really into cars. My dad, like he had like, I remember some of like his cars. He had like probably like an 84 Toyota pickup, 2-wheel drive.
Yeah. Yep.
And it was black with like gold stripes. And I remember going with him to the wheel shop, and this was probably one of those like really like core memories that I didn't realize how influential it was at the time. But we went to this wheel shop in downtown Atlanta, and I found out years later that it was owned by Eric Sermon from EPMD, the rap group. And like I remember my dad and like salesperson or whatever taking wheels out to the street. Like he parked on the opposite side of the street, and they go and put the wheels down like on the little stand and like see what they look like. So he ended up buying like gold and machine Gotti wheels for this Toyota pickup. And like now I'm just like, dude, that was some baller shit.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
like,
dude, not for nothing, but
you know,
tell everybody about the Pantera too.
oh yeah, oh my God. Like before I was born,
Like, come on, man. Like that
yeah,
was
my
Jesus.
yeah, new in 72, my dad bought a brand new Pantera. It was red, I assume black interior, and he proceeded to paint like white to yellow flames on the hood.
I
And
mean,
lowered bigger tires, Lucas fog lights, exhaust, and like that car is like a legend in our family and like my dad's friend circle. Like, he's a black dude in Atlanta in the South in 1972. Like they barely ended segregation. This fool's driving around in like this like Italian exotic that sounds like a muscle car, and I'm sure he was street racing anybody that would give him the time of
right.
day. He also happened to be on the police force. He also happened to be a
That
cop.
helped.
So it was just
Yeah.
like, yeah. And it was just a wild thing to see. I've got pictures of the car, and like my cousins love to tell me stories about riding to school and that. Like he would, like they'd beg him to come pick him up from school and take him to school.
Yeah.
And you'd be the star of everywhere you went, and
Yeah.
he was just my dad had, I think, great taste in cars, but he was out there, man. Like he was a show off. He was the like
Well,
he
he
would,
had a sense of style too, dude. And not for
yeah,
nothing, but like
yeah,
I mean, you're one of the most stylish dudes that I've ever met. And the fact that I don't care what
thank
anybody
you.
says, that shit's genetic,
Oh yeah, for
right?
sure.
Because like for him to do that back then and make the car so that 40 years, 50 years later,
Yeah,
people are still like, do you remember that Pantera? Like
yeah.
that's pretty amazing.
And like I would drive it just as is. Like, I see a lot of Panteras that have been modded in ways, and I'm just like, damn, man, like that's so unfortunate. Like I would, if I were to buy that, like my friends are always encouraging me to buy a Pantera, do it up, like either like my dad's or in my own way. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, I see so many that I'm just like, I would have to undo so much of what is done to that
Yeah.
car that it's not even worth it. Like, that's a cool car for somebody else, but like I was never into like the GTS or GT5 flares, like all that. The big Countach style wing, like that stuff, I don't think belongs on a Pantera, even though they sold them like that. Like that's
Sure.
not the Pantera that I kind of lust after. Like I like the originals, like the pre-Ls with the chrome bumpers.
Clean.
Yeah,
Yep.
just like stock body, and just like I would just fill the wheel wells and like lower it, just perfect the stance and call it a day. And maybe paint flames on the hood, but
Yeah.
like I mean, obviously I'm biased and like I'm endeared to that car and the legend of it, but I swear if I found that car just as it was, I would leave it alone. Like I would totally drive that car in that state, which I couldn't say about a lot that Panteras that I come across.
Well, dude, let me ask. So when we, if you look at the cars that we personally own, right? We all gravitate to kind of older stuff. Yeah. We just do. Yeah. I always attribute it. A lot of it is for the entertainment, right? For the for the sounds and the shapes and stuff like that. But I'm always curious. Like I still don't gravitate to new stuff, and I always, and I don't know if it's the the new stuff is.
When was the last time
I don't want to say
a new car, like new, or newish, like less than 5 years old?
Oh.
Did you have your M5 new? Didn't you have an E39 M5?
Yeah, but I bought that used.
Okay.
On my Mustang. I bought a in 2013 Mustang GT, brand new. That's the last new car I've owned.
That's still like a throwback.
It's yeah. I mean, it was still V8 solid live axle.
Right. Well, also the Demon.
Yeah, but you know what? The Demon, it's weird. The Demon, I don't consider. The Demon's kind of a weird anomaly for me. It's I like, yes, it's a new car. We got it brand new in 2018. But it doesn't feel like a new car.
Right.
And I guess that's the reason I was so attracted to it, right? Yeah. It's still this like big, brute, guttural, stupid, wheel standing burnout machine.
Exactly.
So
it's
as
like
close to the 1970s. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's why, I had a Hellcat as a company car for 3 years, and I enjoyed the hell out of that. And like, I probably would not have spent my own money on that, but being a company car that I did not have to pay for, like I couldn't have asked for anything better. And I absolutely love that thing and I miss it. But at the same time, like now I kind of feel like those cars are like stigmatized. Like I'd love to have another one, but you just end up being one of those Mopar dudes, those idiots that are,
Just
running from the
sideshows and
cops, doing
yeah,
sideshows, doing burnouts everywhere they go and stuff. And like, I've never gotten a speeding ticket, knock on wood. I never got pulled over in that car other than a fix-it ticket for exhaust and no front license plate. And I'm like, exhaust is stock. So I don't
right.
know what you want me to do
Yeah,
about that. But I had my front license plate in the windshield.
yeah.
And I think it's a testament to maturity, because if I had that car in my 20s,
Oh
I
yeah.
would have
Oh no.
it would have been impounded. I would have gone to jail multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
But having it in like my mid to late 30s, like I was just like, this is a responsibility. I know how to handle this. It doesn't belong to me.
Right.
It was a company car, so I didn't baby it, but I didn't get into any of the foolishness that
Right.
that the owners of those cars are kind of known for these days. So
Right.
I
Well,
miss it, but it served a time and a place.
totally. Well, let me ask you, what do you gravitate to now? So, and whether it's old or new, and because we listen, our tastes for the most part, that tastes evolve over time.
Sure.
What do you gravitate to now? Like, what do you look at and go, ooh, that's kind of
I'm
okay.
still all about 80s and 90s cars, but 3 years ago, I think I was on in 2020, and back then we were all about, or I was all about 96 Impalas, the OBS trucks.
Yep.
I had my two-door Tahoe, my 96 two-door Tahoe that was lowered, all blacked out. I had that truck for 3 years. I just sold it last August. I was really into the Ford and GM stuff of the era, and I still am.
Yeah.
But all that stuff skyrocketed. And
Yeah.
it's not because you or I talked about it or owned them, but like it was just, they were due. It was just like,
Sure, absolutely.
if you followed like the truck market, like in the 90s, 50s and 60s, trucks were where it was at, right? Like 80s and 90s, like you had to have like a 56 57 tri-5
Right.
Chevy or an F100, street rod style or with big billets and stuff. Then it became like the 65 through 72 C10s, like those became super popular. Then the square bodies. So it was just a natural progression that, the OBS trucks would become much more popular and valuable. But
Right.
I always thought those were special, and I always gravitated towards those because, like I said, when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, like I was all about car magazines.
Yeah.
And it started out with like 4-wheeler and 4x4 magazines. Sorry, I'm getting tangled up in these wires. But then it became all about trucking magazine and sport truck magazine. So it was like, the California sport truck movement, and like, that just exploded with the OBS trucks and like the wild paint schemes and the custom tweed interiors and like all the billet parts that became available. Like, to me, those trucks like provided like an aftermarket renaissance. Like they totally, they brought street rod styling and like build quality to like an everyday driver. Like it was just like, the guys that were having Boyd and those guys build cars back then, like they also wanted like a daily driver that was custom and like kind of representative of their personality, and showed that they weren't just like, they didn't have just a work truck or a station wagon. Like they had
something
to have
different,
something cool with personality, right? And like, dealerships were stocking these trucks with these crazy paint schemes and like monochromatic stuff, like getting rid of all the trim and all the chrome and like lowering them on wheels. So it was like, you could finance one. So they were everywhere, at least in Southern California. And, a lot of those trucks survived. A lot of them went to Japan, a lot of them went to Mexico, but, they were pretty ubiquitous, and like, they gave birth to a whole new segment of the aftermarket that I think really that really saved the aftermarket. Like, I don't think if it weren't for, and my two favorite chassis, I guess, are the Fox body and the OBS like GM trucks, right?
Yep.
Because they had such an aftermarket following that they built like a cult like community, and there were so many different build styles and so many different ways you could modify them and make them yours. And I think they just brought a resurgence to the aftermarket and tuning and modifying your cars. And I think that's something that we all today owe those chassis and those designers a debt of gratitude, because they really saved the industry. And I don't think
I agree.
We'd have nearly as many options and manufacturers in the aftermarket if it weren't for those two chassis. So those are still my favorites, but my taste has shifted a bit since then. I'm still into the 80s and 90s stuff, but now I'm more into, I can't afford them, but like the AMGs, like, they've exploded. Like those cars, like 5-10 years ago, like the 80s AMGs, especially the pre-merger stuff,
Dude,
like, you know,
please.
they were almost looked at like, ugh, like that is such a nightmare. I'll never find parts, you know, I'll never be able to afford
Right.
service on those. But now they've exploded not only in popularity, but in value. And it's like, all right, that's untouchable for me. But like what I can come close to and like in the shadows of the AMG cars are like the SLs, the R129 SLs. Like,
Oh, dude, well, I called you, what
Yeah.
was it, a month ago?
Yeah.
See, and this is the problem. Like I called Ron because I've been on a serious hunt for a 500 or a 560 SEC,
Mhm.
right? And I called Ron because the SECs now have started to get crazy as far as price. And I
Yep.
found a 560 SEL. And my first
Yep.
call was to Ron. And I'm like, how do I make this wicked cool? And Ron's
And
like, all right. He like laid out the plan. He's like, this is what you're going to do. You're going to buy it and then you're going to give it to me.
Yep.
And then I'm going to make it cool and I'm going to give it back to you. Right.
And like the recipe is so simple. It's like almost like exactly what I did with Mike's 96 Impala is just wheels, lowering, exhaust. Like, you know, they don't need much. And like, you know, you'd probably want to do like an updated stereo system and
Sure.
like, you know, something with Bluetooth to make it like daily drivable and livable. But like,
Yeah.
other than that, like you don't want to mess with it. And like, you definitely don't want to start, you know, ripping it apart. And like, you know, those cars are just so classy and like so solidly built.
Yeah.
But like if it's been maintained and not just like glossed over or fucking, you know, ketchup or lipstick on a pig,
Right.
like if it's a real clean, solid car, which sounded like yours was not.
It was not.
Right. You know, you can't go wrong, especially, you know, at a decent price because there's still a lot. Like I found wheels for you. I found staggered set of
I know.
17-inch AMG wheels, like first search, and they were
Yep.
down here in LA. And I'm just like, this is it. If you get that
Yep.
car, here's your wheels.
Right.
And you know, that stuff is still available, and it's also, you know, going up in price and becoming, you know, more scarce, but it's out there. And like it's just such a simple recipe for those cars. So for me, like what's next for me is a R129 SL. And like I've been talking
That's
about this
great.
for almost a year, but those of you that don't know, like my social media handles, like on Instagram, I'm 777 style, so 777 style, because the home I grew up in, the address was 777, and it's like attachment to my family. And like, you know, we all choose that, like, you know, it's in our email addresses, it's you know, in our passwords probably. But you know, we just have my family has a special attachment to that number. And the paint code for the special edition, like the last year, 2002, they had a special edition called the Silver Arrow Edition. And cosmetically, like, or aesthetically, I should say, it looked identical to the regular SLs, except it had 2-piece 18-inch wheels, which I don't even really love. But the interior was a little bit more special. It had a two-tone, like silver and black interior, where all the others were just, you know, monochrome, whatever color. And it had like a two-tone silver steering wheel. It had engine turn dash bezel, like
that's
you know,
cool.
like your 70s like Trans Am.
Yeah.
So it's like just cool little details. And it's like, that's the stuff that you see and you interact with all the time. So I kind of value that. Like, you know, if I'm going to spend time in a car, like I want the like most special edition, like, you know, and it's not a huge premium for those, but the best part, going back to the 777s, is that the paint code, like the paint is like this diamond, like silver. Like you see it next to a regular silver car that's like metallic and you're like, oh, that's a really pretty silver. You see the Silver Arrow silver, and it's just like it's got like crushed diamonds in it, like it just pops, and it's super metallic and like dazzling, right? And the paint code is 777. So I'm just like, that's, you know, those cars have been special since I was that age. I was 22 in 2002, and like, you know, I knew that they were special. I think I was working as a valet and back home in Atlanta, and like I'd see them occasionally. I was just like, this car is the shit. Like, this is special, right? You know, it's just like that paint, like I said, was just dazzling. So, you know, for not much of a premium over a regular SL, like I think that's what's next for me. And it's like, that's on the cusp of like too modern and digitized for me. But like, they're still like, they sold so many of those cars that they're not like impossible to find. In fact, somebody sent me 2 Silver Arrows for sale in LA just a couple days ago. So they're out there, but there's also, you know, you can do some of the work yourself on them. Like it doesn't require, you know, crazy dealer, you know, equipment, like their crazy machinery and stuff like newer cars. But I don't know, man, it's just classic style. Like back then you were a baller if you had an SL. Like that was just like
Absolutely, dude.
all the rap videos and stuff. And like,
Yeah.
you know, like I said, I was valeting at like these, you know, super posh restaurants in Atlanta, and those were the cars that came in and like
Right.
dropped jaws. Like this was before anybody really had a Lamborghini or Ferrari. Like those were
Right.
just like impossible, and like, you know, you just
Yeah.
never saw them. So it was like, you know, like a 4750, 848,
Oh yeah, dude.
and an SL.
That was big.
Those were like, ooh, like that dude's got paper, like, and he's got good taste, right?
Well, you know, it was interesting. Like you mentioned, you know, you didn't see the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris. I remember back in the day, and I know I've mentioned this before, but it's, man, you back in the 80s and the 90s, if you saw a Lamborghini or Ferrari, that was an event that you spoke about for months.
Totally.
Right? Like I remember seeing my first Countach, and this was probably sometime in the mid 80s. My little head exploded all over the wall. Totally. I was just like, I talked about that. I probably talked about that for a year. You know, there was a guy that lived in our neighborhood, and I remember he had a 328 Ferrari, and I would just sit there and just pray to catch a glimpse as we both drove by his driveway of that car. And then God forbid you actually saw it in motion.
Yeah.
You know, just, you know, a event where now you see a Lamborghini and you're like, see a Ferrari. I'm like, they're just, for some reason, they're just not as special. Like I have no attachment. I don't care about them. If I see something from that era, 70s, 80s, 90s, I go, okay, that's where I want to be with those cars, because I feel like back then they were really special.
Yeah.
Where now you're just like, well, the dude's got money, he bought one, that's fine. But I don't know, the whole cachet.
You're just like, yeah, okay, you're a crypto bro. You're, you know, what's your hustle? Like, you know, like that's fast money. Like you almost respect somebody with like a new Lambo less than, you know, a lot of other cars, because it's just like, it's super ostentatious, and you're just like, you're compensating. Like back then it was just like, you know, you were a connoisseur, you were an enthusiast, and like you had something that was impossible to acquire. And now it's just like, you know, you could lease a Lambo for like $1,500 a month, and it's a big deal. And like, you know, you wrap it gold chrome, and now like, okay, everybody's looking at you, but you know, what are they saying? What do you do with that attention? Like I don't want that kind of attention personally. And those cars just, like you said, they don't do anything for me. I mean, I'm kind of biting the hand that feeds me here, because I probably, you know, sold more wheels for exotics like Lamborghinis, Rolls Royce, Ferrari, McLaren, all that shit, and any one individual, you know, throughout my career. But it doesn't mean that that's like my bag. Like I'm just not into it. Like, you know, I love like anybody that personalizes their car and like stances it right. Like I can appreciate that, but like, you know, I'm just not impressed. Like if one of my friends like sent me a picture of his new Lamborghini, I'd be like, cool, man. Like, you know, like, but you send me a picture of like that SEL, and I'm like, dude, come pick me up. Like, let's ride.
Exactly.
Like I want,
you're right.
I want to know, I want to be like transported to that time, and like what it felt like to drive, like, you know, through Harlem, or, you know, downtown Atlanta, or, you know, on Sunset Boulevard in like 1989 in some baller ass Mercedes. Right.
Well,
like,
isn't that the coolest part though? Because I remember, and I mean, right to your point, you know, it goes back to the event. If you saw somebody rolling up in something like that, there, like, I would conjure these whole scenarios in my head of what they did. Like, who is that? What, you know, what does that person do? Like, how did they make that money? And what is it? Because it was such an amazing thing to actually see. And that's always stuck with me. And I feel like now, and I don't want to say that money comes easy to a lot of people, but it's just, it doesn't have the same meaning, I think, as it did 30 years ago or 40 years ago when those cars were.
Money is literally worth less now, but you know, it's just, again, it's just, I don't know. It's, I'm happy for our industry that, you know, the cars have exploded in popularity, but also like, you know, we're priced out of a lot of stuff. Like, you know, I'm not even gonna lie. Like a lot of the new cars that I like an AMG, like if I could have probably any car, brand new car right now, it'd probably be AMG E63 S wagon. I can't even sniff that. Like used, like, you know, they're still $100,000. Like there was a minute where like the you know, the new body style, like the 2018s or whatever, like in 2020, like you could buy a 2018 for like 70, 80 grand. now they're all like
I
100
know.
grand plus, just because of scarcity, and people have realized like, okay, they're not going to continue to make these, turbocharged V8 cars
Right.
much longer.
Right.
Everything's going electric, so it's like, the enthusiasts of us that have money like realize, okay, we're nearing the end of the road of the shit that we really like.
That's right.
And it's like the perfect example to me is the Mercedes C63 has been, for 2 generations, this wild V8 powered
Yeah.
little pocket rocket, right? It's crept up to $100,000, but now the new model is a hybridized turbocharged 4-cylinder. And it's like I'm sure the performance is there, but like that doesn't interest me at all. Like it just like that sucks the soul out of that car. And it's like it's all about having a big V8 stuffed under the hood of like your smallest car, right? It's like the classic hot rod formula. So, the technology is cool and shit, but like that just doesn't interest me. Like I'm not interested.
Well, I think the brands they've diluted, they've cannibalized and diluted themselves to the point where it loses any cachet, right? Like now, their BMW slaps an M moniker on flipping everything. They're like, it's an M Sport, it's an M this, it's an M that. It's like it's not, like when you saw an M car back in the day, it was an M car. It was truly special. If you saw something with an AMG tag on it back in the day,
you didn't
that
end up with that by accident. You didn't go to the lot and just be like, oh, I like that silver one. What's that? I'll take that one. You had to seek out that performance.
Exactly. There was a guy back in the day, this doctor that didn't live far from us, and this is probably mid 80s, I guess, and he had a black on black Euro bumper, and I'll never forget it, 500 SEC slammed on 5-spoke Ronalds, and I was like,
hell yeah,
what? This guy, and it had the wood dash with the AMG steering wheel on it, and I used to see that thing and be like, that is the slickest, baddest, but in the same token, most elegant thing. And now I see an AMG and I'm like, and I listen, as a press guy, every now and then we get them. And I had an E60 something AMG with the turbocharged, whatever it was. And I was like, I could give a shit.
Right.
There was nothing about that car that made me say, you know what I want to do? I want to spend 90 grand on this.
Yeah.
Like I'd rent it for a day from Turo, but that's as far as I go.
Yeah. And so, we're sitting here bashing new cars. I do have a newer car. I have a 2016 Audi S7 that's tuned and like lowered on wheels, obviously, but like there's really nothing else that I could do or want to do with that car, right? So it's like it's been tuned for about a year now. It probably makes like 550, 575 horsepower, depending on octane, like 600 pounds-feet of torque. Like, it's a rocket. Like it makes 100 horsepower and 150 pounds-feet more torque than stock. And so it was a cool, elegant, kind of sporty car before that. And now it's like a rocket ship. I love it. Like it's like the best thing ever. And it's like, but it's kind of taking attention away from my other cars. It's like I can just jump in this and it does everything. And I can also carry like a set of wheels in the back. It's a hatchback. Like I can throw literally a set of mounted wheels and tires in the back and deliver them if I need to. And it just does everything so well. But and I'm not saying it lacks driving excitement, but it's like, it's all-wheel drive. The steering is really numb. Like, I've hit the canyons with buddies and they're like Porsche GT3s and stuff. And it hangs because it's got the power, it's got the grip, it's got 290, depending on what wheels I have on it. It's sometimes got 295s on all 4 corners. Like, it's planted, it's stable, it does everything you want it to do. But I'm never getting sideways in it. I'm never like, I just miss the thrill of like my Hellcat or my Mustang, for example. Like,
but as a daily though, something like that makes sense as a daily.
Yeah, it makes sense, but it's also expensive as shit. Like, I only paid 45 grand for the car, but like the payment is like ridiculous. And I'm just like, I haven't had a car payment in so long because I've been driving my old stuff. I dailied my 96 Tahoe for a while.
Yeah.
Before that I had the Hellcat. Before that I had a Fiat 500 electric, and then I drove my Mustang as a daily for a while. So it's just like, it was a badge of honor to drive old stuff or have somebody else foot the bill. And like, I didn't really have to worry about that. Now it's just like, is this car worth this much money? Or is like, is the payment worth the, I don't know. I don't want to say the lifestyle, but the fact that like I just drive that car and that's what I take everywhere, and like I don't really pay attention to my old stuff. Like, I feel like I need to get rid of this and get another like 90s daily driver, so that I can get back to all of the other cars that are sitting and like waiting for my attention, like the Mustang, my 62 Continental, like like that's the stuff that really excites me, and I don't think about it when I have like a new fun, comfortable daily driver. So
and when you're talking about that price point, you're talking about say 45 grand. 45 grand buys you an enormous amount of automobile from the 80s and the 90s. I'm talking like, you want to go buy the best IROC on the planet? No problem. 45 grand, go ahead. You want to buy an SEC? No problem. SEL, SL, go ahead. Right? That is such a perfect number to be able to go out and get something where every time you go to get in it, you go, oh, that's badass.
But see, in my mind, it's a 2-for-1 deal. Like, I'm just like, for this payment and this amount of money, and like I have some equity in the car, thankfully. So it's like I'm not upside down. So like I'm happy to sell it and get rid of it and get 2 new cars, 2 whole cars. Yeah. But like I told you this, like I really want that SL, and if I can find one for the right price, like in my opinion, it has to be the Silver Arrow. But like if I find another one that's like done already to my taste and like has been gone through and sorted, then I would do another color, another edition. But those cars are available all day for like really clean, like $15,000 to $25,000.
Exactly, and that's a ton of car.
Right. I also want another Lightning, like 99 to 04 Lightnings. Like, so much fun, and like it's a burnout monster, so it would get me back to that. And like both are capable daily drivers. Like if they've been maintained, like they'll run forever, and there's like the scarcity of those cars isn't such that I would be scared to daily drive them. Like like my commute is different now than when I bought the Tahoe. I bought it as a daily, but I was literally going a quarter mile down the street to Hoonigan. When Hoonigan was still in Long Beach, and I lived in Long Beach. And then I started driving, when I started at Wheel Pros, I started driving to Irvine every day. It was every day. So it was like 5 days a week. I'm driving to Irvine. I'm on the 405. There's construction on the 405. So you literally don't know what freeway you're going to get from one day to another, because they move the lanes. Like, it's like they shift the lanes, and like if you're not paying attention, like you're like, oh shit, like I like, swerve over 3 lanes, and like people aren't paying attention all the time. People are driving Teslas and not driving. And it got so scary in the Tahoe because that thing was insured. I couldn't get collector car insurance on it. So I couldn't get agreed upon value insurance on it because it was my daily driver. And basically Blue Book on that truck was like $3,000. Like,
exactly.
They gave it no value whatsoever. I paid $20,000 for it. And, I spent a few grand on it, just like updating it, modernizing it, cleaning it up. And I'm like, I wanted $30,000 for the truck when I sold it. I didn't get that, but I was going to include another set of forged wheels and a bunch of extra parts and stuff. So, I'll say I came close. And, I was just like, I was terrified driving that thing every day because it didn't have a rear bumper. It had a roll pan. I'm just like, if I get rear-ended, this thing is toast, and they're not going to give you anything for it. Exactly. So, I was just like, for a year, I was just like, dude, I got to get out of this. I got to get another daily. And like, that's why I ended up getting the Audi, because it has radar cruise control, and I can literally set it and just like, I pay attention. I keep my hands on the wheel, but like, it had like lane departure warning, and like, like it'll stop and emergency stop. Like I totally trusted it. And I was like, this is amazing. But now I go to the office 2 to 3 days a week. And like, if traffic is bad in the afternoon, which it always is, I take PCH. So I just cruise from Irvine over to Newport and then up PCH to Long Beach. And that commute like is much less taxing, much less stressful. And so I'm like, I could have an SL or a Lightning. I could even drive my Mustang like every day.
And you can just enjoy it.
Yeah. So, for my lifestyle, it's like, all right, I don't need anything crazy, like overpowered. Like I don't need another hot rod to complement my Mustang, but like I could have one comfortable cruiser and then something, a truck in case I need to like move wheels or go to Home Depot, and
there's something to be said for that, right? Is to have that one. Like I still daily my 96 Bronco, but that's a stock that's a big steel bumper Bronco. And yes, the values have gone up on those, but I don't look at it like that. Like I bought it to be a daily, and I treat it like a daily. Like it gets really dirty, and I clean it once in a blue moon, and I take it everywhere. I don't worry about it. You know, I mean, you try to keep things as nice as you can, because when you start out with something nice, you want to maintain it.
Yeah.
But I think when you go into that mindset, I think the Tahoe was a different story, because that truck was already customized.
Yeah.
With the roll pans front and rear. That was really a beautiful sport/show truck. I mean, that was a different piece. But people ask me, they're like, well, you still drive that Bronco? I'm like, it's not rare. They made 9 billion Ford Broncos back in the day. It's still like, I could buy any part on that truck for $17. Right. So if it breaks, it's not a big deal. Who cares?
Yeah.
But it's still cool. Like, I still like getting into it. I still like, you know, when it's shined up, people look at it and be like, that's a badass truck. It still it gives me that feel of I'm driving something special, even though it's just an old, you know, tractor. That's all it is, you know?
Exactly.
So, all right. So the SL, that's on your list. And I think that your time frame on that, like when you talk about like 2002, around there, that's when things really kind of started to shift to more of the digital side. Like my 911's in 02, and I don't want anything newer, because I lose that kind of analog experience and things like that. I think that, you know, when we talk about the new cars, there are some, listen, if I had to buy a new car, and people laugh at me when I say this, they're like, what would you buy? I'm like, I would probably go out and buy like a Toyota Camry hybrid and get 50 miles to the gallon and not worry about it. And it would do everything I ever wanted, because that makes sense. Right. You know, other stuff like that, where you're going, well, what do I want to get back in lifestyle? The thing about that early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, all the technology's there. Yeah. You can still drive them. They're still bomb-proof, reliable. Yep. So, like, I think that's a great idea.
We shall see, man. I think I just I need to not wrap my head around it, just like accept it. Like, you know, my heart's telling me it's the right thing to do, to like I said, get back into like another cool older car, and like, you know, there's a total community around those cars, and that's one of the things that I miss with the Audi. It's like, there's an Audi community, and there's like SoCal Quattro and like a couple other Audi clubs and stuff, but I'm like, I've never been a car club guy. Right. But you know, it's like the Mustangs, the OBS trucks, 96 Impalas, like they all have a real community surrounding them, and that's like one of the things that is most attractive about them, is that, like, you know, if you need parts, like there's somebody holding, like, you know, you get into like a Facebook group, or, you know, you just post on Instagram, and like, you know, the guys that are in that community, they're all helpful, and, you know, they want their community obviously to burgeon and like continue to grow, and like, you know, appreciation for those vehicles to grow. So they're super helpful, and like, you know, willing to share knowledge, and you know, recommend parts and shops for different services and stuff. So, you know, that's another factor in anything that I'm into. Like, if, you know, I don't know that I could ever get into like Citrons, because who the hell am I going to trust to work on that? You know, and it's not about being in a club and like going to car shows together. Like, I don't really care about that, but just like I said, having a community that's like enthusiastic and helpful, and like will, you know, help you sort your shit, and, you know, make it as good as it can be is hugely important when choosing a car.
I think the other thing about that is, if you buy these cars, like my thing is, I want to own and experience as many cars as I can before I kick the bucket, right? If you buy the cars right, and you buy the right car, you can essentially drive that car for free for as long as you own it, right?
That's exactly what I did with the Tahoe,
exactly right. So like, I know, like, if I bought my Bronco, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now, I'll absolutely make money on it if I ever go to sell it. Every car, and that's, I think, a big thing that people need to consider when they're they're buying older cars, that they want to think it's cool, right? If you buy the right car, you will always make money on it. Right. It's always better. I'm a huge fan of whatever model it is. You go out and you seek the absolute best condition, best mechanical car you can. You're going to pay more up front a little bit, but you're always going to come out ahead when it's time to move it.
You know, people clown me when I posted my truck for sale for $30K, and like, you know, people don't like to read, so they didn't see that there was another set of forged wheels, which is probably like $4 or $5 grand worth of value, plus like 2 bumpers, 2 bumper covers, 2 grills, 2 billet grill inserts. Like, I had brakes, I had all this shit,
Right.
And I gave it to the new owner. He paid,
Right.
close to what I expected for it. He didn't get the wheels. He didn't get the extra
Mhm.
set of wheels, but I made money on that.
Mhm.
And even if I just broke even, like I put 23,000 miles on that truck in 3 years. Like I
Yeah,
got my use out of it, and it didn't
absolutely.
depreciate. But like the other thing is I fell in love with that truck the second I saw it. It was on a trailer. It was super clean. It was like elevated on a trailer. And I was just like, I could see underneath it. I could see everything that was done to it,
Yeah.
and it was done right. And the paint was original, but pretty much, flawless. It just needed a buff. And I did
Yeah.
that. And I think what people didn't realize, like when you see a truck like that posted, is how clean it is, how unmolested it is. It had 100,000 miles when I got it. So it had 125 or 28 when I sold it.
Mhm.
So it's not super low miles, but the truck is everyday drivable. And, like you can jump in and go wherever. And I wouldn't hesitate to drive that truck anywhere. But most importantly, like it was just clean and unmessed with. Like it wasn't like, it had options that, other trucks didn't have, like, a
Mhm.
two-tone leather, like a two-tone leather interior, and the tailgate, like, which
Mhm.
was hugely
Yeah, yeah.
valuable to me. And it's like you're people were comparing it to just your run-of-the-mill 4x4
And
two-door
it's not.
Tahoe with barn doors with cloth interior that has some rust here and there. And like
Right.
it's not like, you have to see it in person to have an opinion on something like this. And
Correct.
it's the difference between buying something and not buying something, or like being a part of that community, is like you see so many trashy examples. You're just like, man, these trucks all suck. Like there's no
Right.
way that truck is as valuable as you say it is, because all the ones that I see in my area, have rust and have issues and
Dude,
this and that. And it's
listen.
just like, dude, you gotta, like, I search nationwide for cars. Like I'm not
Right.
scared to get on a plane. I'm not scared to even buy a car sight unseen. I bought my Mustang out of Oklahoma without ever seeing it. The car had sat for basically 15 years after being built as like a street racer. So, I knew I was taking a chance there, but I also had a plan. Like I had a new motor, a 351,
Mhm.
waiting to go in that car. So it's like, if the motor grenades, I'm ready for it. It did, but I wasn't
Mhm.
upset. Like I drove it for 6 months and with no issues. The
Mhm.
timing chain broke, and I was like, all right, now I put the
Yeah.
351 in. Like I do what I planned. So
Right.
having a plan and buying the best example you can are, huge in this market. Not that I'm some, great collector of cars or anything, but it's just like, you're not taking a chance if you do your due diligence and make sure that you are finding like the best example for you, or you have a plan if something goes wrong. Like, so it's fun. It's fun seeing you like flip cars and, enjoy them for a while. It's
Mhm.
fun seeing my buddy Vin from Hoonigan. Like he's the master. Like he makes money on everything, and he's like on his fifth Raptor now. And like,
Right.
he likes what he likes. He's just like always into like BMWs, Porsches, and Raptors. And, he just cycles through them, enjoys them for what they are, throws some parts at him and enjoys it, and says, okay, it's time for somebody else to enjoy this. Let
Yeah.
me, get a few bucks out of it, and then I'll find something, else unique and fun to play with. So, that's kind of the model for me. And I'm just trying to get back into that kind of lifestyle. Like I've just, for the last couple of years, I just have been pretty inactive. And I want to have fun with cars again.
Well, I think that's where so many of us are. Um, and I think that philosophy of just going out buying experiences, if after a while, if you sell it, that's fine. Um, but the main thing is just to enjoy everything
Yeah.
you get your ass in the seat of. So, dude,
Yeah.
we're coming up on an hour. So let me ask you, where can everybody find what Ron is doing? What are your social handles? So on and so
So,
forth.
I mean, I'm really only active on Instagram, and I'm not even that active there. But again, 777 style, 777 style on Instagram, and I have a YouTube channel I haven't done anything with, but I'm thinking of tinkering and doing something with that coming up this summer. So it's the same name, so you'll find it there, and I'm sure I'll promote it on Instagram. But yeah, man, like as far as like the stuff that I've been working on, just check out Wheel Pro's website, and
Mm-hmm.
pretty much anything new in our car and street brands, including Rotoform, Asante, American Racing, US Mags, like everything. I've been there almost 3 years now, and it's weird because it's like we're so far out in development that most of the stuff that I worked on 2-3 years ago is just now coming to market. But if you want to see what it is that I do, or you want to see my work, that's where you'll find it.
Very, very cool. Ron, thank you so much for coming
Yeah,
on,
man.
brother. It is always just great to just bullshit about cars and,
Absolutely,
you know,
man.
The biggest problem with these conversations is now we're both going to go down a rabbit hole. I know.
Yeah,
I'm gonna start
totally.
looking for Mercedes again.
Yeah.
Be like, God damn it.
Yeah.
So, but
that's the fun in it, man. And send me anything you want me to check out down here, and I'll do the same.
oh, dude, 100%, man. 100%. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to another great show. As always, if you're looking for your dream car, check out Hemmings.com. Go to our classified marketplace and our auction. And that's it. This is airing Tuesday, but today is Friday. So I'm going to tell everybody, enjoy your following weekend. Yeah. And we will see you next time on the Hot Rod Barbecue. Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod Barbecue podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod Barbecue podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.